Hey guys, welcome back to Serial and Midnight. My name is Heath Holland, and I've got quite a roundtable here to talk about the Fleischer Studios, Fleischer Animation specifically. We've got Mauricio Alvarado, the owner of Rockin' Pins and the producer of the Fleischer Animation Restorations. We've got Ray Pointer, a Fleischer author and historian, the author of The Art and Inventions of Max Fleischer, American animation pioneer, and Jane Fleischer Reid, Max's granddaughter, who's continuing the legacy. I am so excited to have all of you here to talk about Fleischer and these incredible animated films.
No, we're excited. I think I'll start off by saying I'm a fan of your page. I think we're a part of a bigger piece of just archiving, preserving our history. As as the days go by, the years go by, there's always something new, and it feels like kind of the older stuff gets forgotten or ignored, neglected, and it takes people like us, people like you, fans, people who just love the art of filmmaking, of creating something, and really this has just been just such a pleasure, just a labor of love to save this material. As I know you're a big fan of physical media and getting stuff restored and saved. And the last couple of years, as we've been seeing all these other random or obscure 70s horror movies or lost films or all this sort of stuff that's getting preserved and shared. We saw this need. We saw this this mission of like, hey, there was this great, amazing pioneering animation studio that has not been, at least I feel, has not been really given the credit and love that it really deserves, especially considering how influential they've been. I mean, I'm sure you've seen Cuphead and Bendy and anything sort of paying homage to the Fleischer style. But the sad thing is a lot of younger fans, younger kids have no clue who these characters are or who the studio was. So it's sort of our mission to just, revive the interest, get people knowing, who made these amazing cartoons. And hopefully, by preserving the past, we're inspiring the future to, get new kids into this art or maybe drawn this certain stuff. Because quite frankly, we've been inundated with Disney. There's, the Disney hand has been, all over American culture
Well,
for
we know
decades.
why too, though, right? Because there's this huge corporate interest there, and Fleischer doesn't fit into that mold. And it's not as easy. There's something about Fleischer films that feel a little dangerous to me. They feel a little bit, I don't know. Ray, this is a good place to bring you in. There's something about the Fleischer shorts that are very different from what Disney was doing. What is the thing? What is the je ne sais quoi?
Well, one way of looking at it might be to call them organic, stream of consciousness level. In a lot of respects, I don't think they were really conscious of what they were doing. They just worked as they felt. And in some cases, they were sort of rough on the edge and so forth. And that was a reflection of the environment as well. Another thing, too, is that compared to what Disney's tastes were, they were more urban and more contemporary. As a matter of fact, one of the things when you get into the sound era that stands out is that their music was very contemporary. They were very hip about jazz and swing music, more so than what Disney was doing, although Disney incorporated it eventually. But they were really more in tune with pop culture. In fact, they even built cartoons around jazz musicians, as an example. There were the three with Cab Calloway. There was the one with Louis Armstrong. There was the one with Don Redman. And there were also four of the screen songs with the bouncing ball, right, with the Mills Brothers, who were very popular and very famous on the radio and recordings. So they were in tune with the jazz culture as well. And another thing, too, is that I found a fascination in the art direction and the backgrounds, the environment that was depicted in those backgrounds, and the attention to detail, even in a cartoony way, to the type of architecture because those kinds of houses and buildings were similar to most cities on the East Coast. I grew up in Detroit, so I could see that. I could relate to those craftsman style homes and types of commercial buildings that they depicted.
I just realized we haven't set a baseline for people that don't know Fleischer animation, what we're even talking about. Because there will people might not know. We're talking about Betty Boop. We're talking about Popeye. We're talking about Superman. We're talking about Coco the Clown. Who else should I mention here? Bimbo, perhaps.
One of the biggest films apparently for Thanksgiving back in the day was Gulliver's Travels. That's apparently back in the TV age, they would show Gulliver's Travels during this holiday season. And from all the people that I've spoken with when we do these screenings, that's the one film that they really want to see again. And thankfully, we're working towards getting that back out there. But yeah, there's so many different films that, quite frankly, you know fans don't know that the Fleischers made. I mean, to be specific, there's one called Cobweb Hotel that has been in thousands of public domain releases, and people, every time I post a clip, they just get creeped out, or they get this nostalgia of like, wow, I remember being so scared of this one. And yeah, I mean, the Fleischers' influence is just so monumental, like you mentioned. I mean, they were the first to adapt Superman to the big screen with animation. First to adapt Popeye, a comic character. I mean, Max invented the rotoscope. That's something that we still see today. There's a show I like called Smiling Friends that uses that every once in a while, and I'm like, oh, that's Max's rotoscope. And funny enough that you mentioned Coco, he's become the biggest, at least in this little age of social media, easily the biggest character out of the Fleischers with this new generation. This rapper named Ghostmane, or actually a fan of Ghostmane, made a music video with the Snow White sequence. And because all of the cartoons were animated to music, you could put a track behind it and it kind of goes in sync. So it's synced up with the Ghostmane track. And at this point, it's got like 600 million views. Kids are tattooing Coco and the Ghost on themselves. I mean, funny enough, that was kind of the starting point of this whole project. Was like, all right, because I had the license. That's the thing. I have the license for Betty Boop, but it was like kids don't know who she is. Adults remember her from the grandparents or the moms or dads, but when this character with Coco, it was just going so viral. I asked Jane, because she's part of the Fleischer board, who handled the merchandising. I was like, where are these cartoons? Do you guys have any more of these? There's obviously an interest. Like, could we get more of these so we can kind of build that? And it basically started this whole mission of like, we don't have them. Where would they be? Let's start looking for them. And that kind of started this whole little mission of wow, Max Fleischer did a bunch of amazing animation before Paramount. And to be honest, the Coco films specifically are one of our favorites, just because they're so psychedelic, so out there, and especially considering the time that they were made, just that early stage of animation where they were basically creating these inventions to figure out how to develop this new technique, this new format of animation. And it's crazy to think that they were doing this just analog, nothing digital. And when you look at stuff now, it's like how like it's like such a downgrade from like these guys just working by themselves. And then now it's like, I don't know, I don't want to get into a tangent, but this is kind of why we're so motivated and inspired to save this stuff, is just so we could show people, look, there's a different way to do this. There's these guys didn't have much, but yet they accomplished this amazing feat. But yeah, it's just been so fun and enjoyable to get this stuff out there. I mean, I really can't explain just show how fun we're having. The real thing is you guys have to come out and just see this and on the big screen to really experience it. It's crazy that this stuff has just not been celebrated, as much as it should be. So yeah, it's just amazing,
I might chime in the interest of what you were referring to before and the interest of the restorations, the mention of Cobweb Hotel, which is at a lot of our screenings, the people have seen the poorer reproductions on the public domain tapes, which Mauricio talks about. And for 90 years, the public has really not seen the Technicolor versions. And when we show them, they're absolutely mind boggled. They had no idea about the subtlety of the artwork and the subtlety of the color. So we've had the good fortune to be able to go back to Paramount's negatives and reconstruct from the camera negatives.
That's incredible. I did want to ask about the source material. Does does most of it survive in elements that are able to be saved?
Well, the thing is, we've got the good fortune that the Paramount period is preserved because they have negatives. It's like a collection of bookends, like you've got books and bookends. And so the books in the center represent the Paramount period from 1927 to 1942. The challenge is getting the bookends. Now, there seem to be quite a few more survivors from the silent era, but there are no negatives on those. So we have to rely on prints that are in decent shape. Half the time we're lucky when we could get something that's viewable. One or two of them have just deteriorated beyond use because you're dealing with something that's 100 years old now. But to find any of those in 35 millimeter is a rarity. And we found a handful of them because most of them only exist in 16 millimeter. And so it's the luck of the draw to find something that's acceptable in 16 millimeter. Most of the time they're okay, but naturally they don't have the resolution range that a 35 millimeter print would have. So it is what it is, and we have to deal with that. So the silent era, most of those are from my investigation, there were about 60 of the out of the inkwells, and then the remaining 30 have turned up in varying stages of acceptability. So maybe about 15 of those are okay out of those 90. That goes up to 1927, and then from 27 on, then Paramount comes in. The other end of the collection of books is post-studio, and that's Max's career when he was in Detroit at Jam Handy. So far, I've only been able to find 5 of those. One of the reasons why that's so difficult is because a lot of what he was doing at that time was classified. Because in addition to being supervisor of the animation department there, he was also wanted for his research and development capabilities. So he was doing secret work for the armed forces, like sighting systems for bombers and things of that nature. A lot of people don't realize that.
Do you go into that in your book?
Yes, I do.
We want to make sure we promote the book too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I come into this in the fact that I go back 57 years on this because in 1967, it was 57 years ago, I was being interviewed in the animation department at Jam Handy in Detroit. And during the middle of my interview, Max happened to stop by on his way to Expo 67 to see some old friends. And that's how I had that chance meeting with him. And I certainly knew who he was. So that was the beginning, really, of my serious connection with this history.
Jane, you've been very quiet. I want to get you here. Can you talk? I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up in the Fleischer family and have a you're the closest to the source here out of anybody. What leads you to now want to take up the mantle and continue these preservation efforts and get this stuff saved for future generations? You know, was it, do you remember a dawning like this is something really special?
Well, oddly enough, the dawning actually happened when Mauricio contacted me and, as he described, basically said, "Where are these cartoons?" And I said, "I don't know." Um, what basically how it works is we were raised as a family very much. My parents tried to make our upbringing as absolutely normal as possible. So, my grandfather was just my grandfather, that's all. He was just this nice guy. He'd sent us cute drawings, every now and again when something happened or Now, we have something to do with cartoons. That's all I really knew. And my dad was in the public eye, and because he was a movie director. But again, they really went out of their way to kind of keep things as um, just normal and easy for us as possible. So until I hit um, college, I went to Cal Arts for a few years. Before then, I really had no idea that there was anything kind of unusual about my family. When I got to Cal Arts, animation was a big deal there. So every now and then somebody would say, your last name is Fleischer. Are you related to? And I go, well, yeah. So what?
Were you
Um,
surprised that those questions were coming your way?
yeah, it was like yes and no. Yes, it was like, yeah, and who are you related to? Because at that time at Cal Arts too, there were a lot of Hollywood kids floating around there. So it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. You're related to Selznick, okay. But and then there was no internet or anything, and it was very hard to see the actual cartoons. People had prints. They ran them at Cal Arts a lot, and that was my first real taste of these cartoons. But then over the years, I got distracted with my own life, and that was that. And there was really, they came out. Republic came out with a collection of cartoons, and Olive Films came out with a collection of cartoons, mostly Betty Boop.
Mhm.
And it really wasn't until the pandemic and with the help of the entire internet and Mauricio kind of spurring me on here, that we started finding these films, and we started watching, especially the early ones, and we were all mind blown. I mean, Mauricio and I, my husband, my kids, my brothers, we were all like, "Oh my God, this stuff is fantastic." And so far ahead of its time and so funny. That was really now that I've realized the contribution that my grandfather made to the world of animation and the world of movie making. So it's really become a joy for me to look for his work and then be able to show it to the public and do what I can to preserve what's left of it.
You mentioned that some of maybe somebody had prints from time to time. Was the public domain status of so many of these films, is that a pro or is that a con or is it both? Could it be either or? Anybody
It's
can answer that.
for the most part, I think that it's a pro in that I do believe in things falling into the public domain and becoming publicly accessible to everybody. I think that's really important over time. It's 95 years is enough for a copyright holder. Um, on the other hand, as Mauricio explained too, there's so many lousy copies of these films all over the place that you look at them and go, "Eh." And then you see them, as Ray explained, restored, and they're really marvelous. So that's the con, I think, if anything, of them.
And as a consumer, as like a regular audience member, I think public domain, I know these studios, they want to hold on to their copyrights as much as possible, but really for the Fleischers, public domain really helped keep the studio alive because obviously, with not having to get clearance, all these companies would just, make compilations. And that's why a lot of animation fans, my age, are so into these cartoons because, in the 90s, you'd have 100 bunch of, films in one cassette. So you'd be able to see Betty Boop or Popeye or Superman or Felix the Cat. And quite frankly, that's what kept these characters and cartoons in the public mind, even after decades. Like I said, I'm still getting comments saying, "Oh, I remember watching this, with my grandmother on the old cassette." So it really has helped the Fleischers just continue this life, at least, like I said, with the public. And I just saw somebody posted on Twitter, Jorge Gutierrez. He posted the guy from the Book of Life. He said bootlegging is a good promotional marketing material for a brand, because funny enough, in Mexico, there was a soda brand that kind of bootlegged Betty Boop. They were called the Little Lulu. That's the thing, is they even got the name wrong. They called her Little Lulu, but it's clearly Betty Boop. But because they bootlegged her in Mexico, Mexico adores Betty Boop. They've seen her, through all the soda cans and all this sort of stuff. So funny enough, yeah, public domain really has helped keep these films alive. I'm sure you know about the history about Nosferatu. I mean, look at how Nosferatu, now it's getting this new film coming out, and this all stems from the public domain, film. So, and yeah, to Jane's point, by us now going directly to the original camera negatives for a lot of these public domain films, because yeah, a lot of people have seen them in really crappy, bad copies, but now that we're presenting them in 4K, getting the original camera negative scan, basically showing these cartoons the way they've never been seen before, and because those are already in people's minds, and then when you show them the way it's supposed to look, they're just completely mind blown. It's like if you're a fan of the Beatles and you've listened to the Beatles on cassette this whole time, and then somebody gives you, the digital recording, you're like, holy crap, this just takes it to another level. And I think that's what's really helping us out too, is because those characters are in the public's mind, and we're coming at them saying, hey, you're seeing this stuff, in new 4K, like you've never seen it before. They already know the characters. They know Superman, they know Popeye. So to get them in the theater and showing them these new restorations and still making them laugh, that's the important thing for me, is they got to be funny. They got to still have a life to them. And thankfully they still do. They're so hilarious. The Out of the Inkwells, this last show that we did was at the National Gallery of Art, was it, in Washington, D.C.? 400 people showed up. The whole block was all silent cartoons. That's the thing, is they're silent. When can we get, a young crowd to come see a silent movie? But yet they'll come see a whole batch of Coco cartoons, and then you got a guy playing piano, Ben Modell. So that just gives this whole other layer of, of awesomeness to what we're doing. So it's, like I said, it's been all positive. It's been really just amazing to finally get this stuff out there, and the reactions have just been tremendous. I think I'll admit it. I'm a failed stand-up comedian from back in the day. I tried that for a while, and sort of this is my way, I guess, to make up for that, because to get a whole crowd of people laughing, like not just like chuckles or like full on laughing, is the best feeling in the world. So the fact that I can kind of contribute to that is just amazing. But yeah, public domain certainly has helped, keep the Fleischer brand and cartoons that, still going on for people. So definitely grateful for that.
You mentioned these showings, these screenings. Let's talk a little bit about that. So this is the best way for people to see these, right? To go leave the house. And yeah, there's some of them on the YouTube channel. I mean, I want to make that clear. You can see what you guys are doing by going to the YouTube channel, which is linked in the description of this episode right now. But I know that seeing them in a theater environment with other people that have willingly also left their house to see this thing. See, it sounds so simple, it sounds so obvious, but I'm seeing this huge backlash against theaters from the mainstream, right? Like theatrical attendance it's not what it used to be. But these festival crowds are incredible. And I've gotten to see some silent films, silent comedies with festival crowds in these like what you're talking about. And they just kill. I mean, they are just hilarious. So talk to me a little bit about that. Where can people find out where to go? Like if it's coming near them, what's the best place to do that?
Well, I think, first of all, I'll cede to Mauricio in a minute because he knows more about that than I do. But what we are doing, since we've only been doing this for about 2 years now, we started off, low and slow, just putting a film in every now and again into some place. We started actually with showing Snow White as a movie before what was it, Mauricio? It was
The Addams Family,
yeah,
at the
yeah, the Addams Family.
Symposium.
And it was an outdoor thing. It was, I think, our first time. and the audience just loved it. They just went crazy. So went, oh, okay, that's good. So we started contacting theaters and slowly doing, a little block of cartoons here and there the first year that we were doing this. And that was in 2023 for the most part. And then in this last year, 2024, we have started getting a lot of requests and a lot of people that are interested in screening. So we're looking to screen all over the place, all over the country, mostly at the art venues, the smaller houses. But eventually we'd like to get into some of the bigger theaters too. So we're planning on being throughout the country and in other countries as much as possible over the next couple of years. So, Mauricio, for where people can find out about us?
We're essentially on all social media platforms at fleischertoons. And the one thing that we're also asking fans to do is reach out to us. Let us know, your local venue, local theater. Where do you want us to come show up? Because that's the thing. There's just so many theaters across the country, and we're just sort of a grassroots movement, and we want to connect and have a relationship with the fans. Because the great thing about our project is there's literally over 500 cartoons, so it's not like we're going to run out. And the thing is, we don't want to just keep hitting people over the head, same cartoons, Betty Boop, or same thing over and over. Thankfully, what we've been doing is offering special curated blocks. So every quarter we'll have a fairy tale block, or we'll have an action adventure block, or a silent block, essentially giving theaters an option to say, all right, we'll show this block this day, and then we'll show this other one. But essentially what we're doing is putting all these cartoons to use. There's so many that fit together nicely. And like I mentioned, there's just so many themes. So essentially, yeah, it's just reaching out to venues, letting them know, hey, we've got this, we got that. For example, for Halloween, we did a thing called Betty Boop's Halloween Party. So all we showed is all these, surrealistic, wild cartoons that did really well. And really the kind of jumping off point for us was this big Museum of Modern Art show that we did in March. Essentially, a lot of these venues, they want to have sort of an exclusive a restoration. They want to debut a new restoration. So we had a ton of stuff that we just showed off at the Museum of Modern Art. It initially started about a couple days. It should have been like 2-3 days. We'll show a couple cartoons and that's it. It turned out that the demand was so high, they turned it into a whole week of shows. So every day from, I forget when it started, but that whole week was 2 different shows. So you'd have a color show, a musical show, a New York show or whatever. And that really is what surprised us. I mean, it's like, wow, okay, we knew these were great, but we didn't know how great or how much of a demand there was for this stuff. And funny enough, I know you mentioned that right now theaters are kind of are doing badly or whatever, but I think funny enough, the new movies, yeah, they're it's a little hard to get people to come out, but these nostalgic sort of vintage, hey, watch Jaws or watch Indiana Jones or whatever, have really been taken off. I'm sure you've seen, with Cinecon and over here in LA, they do TCM Fest and all this sort of stuff. And thankfully, yeah, there's a need, there's a demand for these classic cartoons. And I mean, the goal is for us to just do this forever, like where we can, connect with a Fandango or a Fathom Events, or, have these special blocks shown across the country. And, but yeah, just to get back to how to, fans could come check us out, follow us at fleischertoons on all social media platforms. And yeah, reach out to us. Let us know where you want us to come show you these cartoons. We're more than happy to, provide it. And we have goodies. We have popcorn boxes. We have pins. I mean, for Halloween, I did this sort of Betty Kruger parody. So they're letting me have fun with this stuff. But
yeah, you have some of the coolest merch I have ever seen on the Rockin' Pin site. You guys want Betty Boop cosplaying as the Bride of Frankenstein? It's on the site. I want, again, the link's in the description of this episode.
Yeah, and what's really cool is finally, yeah, getting to make merchandise from the cartoons, because usually it'd be like stock footage of Betty's head or something like that. But to actually go in and trace or extract these cartoon images and seeing people reacting to it and buying them, it's just amazing. And it's not to be like, I don't want to be a capitalist or whatever. Like, I know, yeah, sales are great, but really, all this support really helps us out. Just stay in business, keep the mission going. We still have hundreds more cartoons to restore. We're not saying like we're done yet. So as we're doing this, the support from the fans really has been just tremendous and helpful. And one thing that we kind of skipped over that I kind of want to go back and mention, I want to give a shout out to Charlotte, who was on your show from Paramount. If Charlotte didn't post, because she worked at the time when I first saw her video, she had a Vimeo, and she was posting Coco the Clown scans. I guess they did these prior to us being involved, and she would just post these. She just post like a restoration of one and put her own music. And when I noticed that, I was like, how is this person getting these scans? Like, who is this person? Like, what's going on here? And then me just reaching out, just doing some research and finding out like, oh, wait, she's from Paramount. She's like got access to all this material. And that really was sort of a spark that was like, oh, wait a minute, Paramount, let's connect with them. They might have all this stuff. Another shout out to Larry McAllister, who, Jane, we should reach out to him because we haven't talked to him in a while. But Larry was also a big supporter in this because he was like, yeah, we have no plans for this stuff. We have a good relationship with the family. Let's put you in contact. Let's see what we can do. So,
And as long as we're shouting out, let's also mention Andrea Callis, who has been fabulous. She works at the archives at Paramount, and she's kind of, between her and Larry, they really opened the door for us to be able to access their assets. And they've just been wonderful. Well beyond, when I tell people how they're working with us, they're amazed that, a studio as big as Paramount would be as gracious as Paramount's been.
yeah, and there's also another guy, Graham, who's been just so super supportive as well. It's just, I guess the reason why we're so excited and thrilled about, this whole thing is like, it's unheard of. Imagine you going to a studio saying, hey, you've got this film I want to see in HD. Can I get a copy of it? They'll just shut the door, and be like, no. But the fact that Paramount has really stepped up to the plate and being like, yeah, here's what we have. Here are the scans, have fun with it. Let us know when you're going to screen it. It's really, really historic that this is finally being done. And I was telling Ray the other day, I think, the word ahead of its time is always thrown around for some of this stuff. But I really believe the Fleischers were ahead of its time with the jazz music, promoting Black musicians and having these pre-code sexy cartoons and all this sort of stuff. And I can assume only back in the day, they were just terrified of that, given the choice between country Mickey Mouse and New York, Betty Boop and Cab Calloway. I assume the Southern people want to go with the Mickey Mouse stuff. But now that obviously Adult Swim and all these sort of other cartoon entities have now sort of, what do you call it, prepared this new audience to handle this stuff. They're just loving it. They're loving how crazy and surreal and just out there these cartoons are, and to see just them take a new life of its own is just absolutely fascinating. And I mentioned this on the Twitter. I don't want to start a Twitter war or flame war or anything, but it's funny enough. I really feel like the Fleischer version of Snow White is getting a lot more love on social media than the Disney version of Snow White, just with that whole cool video of the Cap Kelly rotoscope. So to see that the Fleischer film's getting a whole new life of its own is just absolutely wonderful. And if anything, I hope it inspires more of these films to get out there. I mean, there's Felix the Cat, there's Mighty Mouse, there's a bunch of stuff that should still be preserved and saved. So yeah, it's just super positive and super awesome.
I have a question for Ray. This is the historian question. So you've spent years working on this. This has to feel like some sort of a renaissance, right? This has to feel like, the dawning of some sort of an exciting new chapter in the Fleischer story.
Well, I've always known that this stuff had value. When I got involved with it, well, first of all, I saw all of these things when they're first new on television in the mid-50s on. So that's how a lot of those from my generation got their sense of animation history. But until the 1970s, all of the animation histories were focused on the Disney accomplishments. And the trouble of it is, there was already an existence in this medium before he ever came on the scene. The thing that's interesting is that Walt Disney was a teenager when Max was already established. And in a lot of respects, Max was an inspiration for Disney because he actually was inspired by a lot of Max's techniques. As a matter of fact, his first series that really got him started was the Alice comedies. That was when Margaret Winkler discovered him and set him up in business, which started the animation industry in Los Angeles. Previous to that, they were all in New York. So he was the first animation studio in Los Angeles. He came out to Los Angeles to be a live action director and then ended up getting into animation because of the Alice comedies. Well, the idea behind that was to do a reversal of what Max Fleischer was doing in Out of the Inkwell, combining cartoons and animation. So he did the reversal of that concept and did it the hard way, where he put a live action girl into a cartoon environment. That was a lot more difficult because it all had to be totally animated. And one of the smart tactics in the way Out of the Inkwell was structured was that only 25% of it was animation. Because you had the live action sequences with Max in them, or his associate, which was either Roland Crandall or George Ruffel, and then everything would build around that. And so you had like a bookend structure to that, where the artist represented by Max would be introduced, and they would have variations on the introduction of bringing in the clown and so forth. And then you'd have your animation sequences, and eventually he would build and he would cross the fourth wall and come into reality and interact with Max, and that you'd have the conclusion.
You know what's funny is that we think of something like, no, my generation thinks of something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit as being this revolutionary thing, but it goes back decades and decades earlier.
Well, actually, it goes back to a technique that he developed as early as 1923. And in some of my videos and in my book, I explain how that came about. When he really got his break with the Bray Studio, he was there from 1916 until 1921. And then in 21, he and Dave went into their own studio, and then the rest is continued history. But when they were at the Bray Studio, they used some of the Bray techniques. One of them was the intermixing of the live action sequences with the animation, so that they could produce these quicker within 1 month. And one of the other techniques that they used was they would use a blow up from the 35 millimeter negative of a live action scene. And then, since Bray had the license for the cell technique, which they developed, they could use a cell overlay and photograph the animation on cells over a still photograph, to make it look like the cartoons were in a live action environment. And sometimes they would try to splice those with the live action where the image was taken. It didn't exactly match, but it was okay, but there'd be kind of a hitch because of the shift between the two film sources. Max wanted an improvement on that, and what he came up with was what was eventually called aerial image photography, where you were rephotographing the live action with the cell over that, frame by frame, rephotographing the live action with the animation frame by frame to make a composite negative, first generation negative. And so that was a development that Max came up with in the 1920s.
And just to kind of quickly plug our YouTube channel, there's a video, or actually there's a lot of videos that Ray is producing for us, sort of mini documentaries about different aspects of the studio, the rotoscope, rotograph. And then you could find on our YouTube channel at fleischertoons, and there's a video showing exactly what Ray's talking about, the rotograph story. And funny enough, you mentioned Roger Rabbit. Charles Fleischer, not related to Jane, but the voice of Roger Rabbit, showed up to one of our events a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, not to brag, but I will, but we've also gotten people like Matt Groening, Billy West. We did a whole bunch of we did two concerts, and we did a couple of events with Tom Kenny, the voice of SpongeBob, who's a massive fan of Popeye. We did these shows where he performed the music of Popeye with the voice, and he did a bunch of tracks from the Fleischer cartoons, which was insane to see because he has a live sort of band with saxophones and all this sort of stuff. So it sounds super legit. It sounds so great. And then one of the other cool accomplishments that we did is we reached out to Seth MacFarlane, creator of Family Guy, because there was a photograph of him when he was working at the Johnny Bravo days, and right next to him is Betty Boop. So I was like, what if we reach out? Maybe you want to help us out. And we reached out. He connected us with Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation, and through that collaboration, we got UCLA to restore a nice batch of films that we debuted at the TCM Film Fest. So now I can say, Jane and I have a credit with Martin Scorsese and Seth MacFarlane. But that just kind of shows you the reach of this stuff. Because before us, the Film Foundation has never restored animation. And, Martin's such a big New York guy, and the Fleischers are from New York, so it just made sense to us. But yeah, it's just, what we're trying to do is, just bring focus, attention to the work of Max and Dave and the rest of the brothers and crew. And just, as much love as all the live action stuff is getting, we'd love to just bring that love to the animated stuff. Because, this stuff is amazing. I can go on and on how amazing they are. But please, if you're a fan of this stuff, if you've never seen this stuff, come out, watch it on a big screen. Check out our Instagram. I post clips all the time. I like to, show people what we're working on. I mean, this last clip that we posted with Betty Boop, I think at this point it's at 1.2 million views. So it's crazy to think we're just, all these old cartoon clips are just doing so well online. But yeah, it's just amazing,
I have to ask you, so we talked about the restoration. Let's get nerdy about the restoration. What are we talking about? What does the restoration process entail? Charlotte tells me a little bit about some of this stuff, but I want to know from you guys, what are we talking about here? We're talking about scanning raw film, scanning negatives, and take it over.
Well, basically, it entails exactly that. First of all, you have to search around and see who's got what. And again, we got very lucky that Paramount has a lot and it's in good shape. For the stuff we can't find, it's also just reaching out to archives, looking at databases, reaching out to private collectors, and finding the asset. Seeing how good it is it good enough? Is it worth scanning? And when it is, we get it scanned. And then the digital file gets sent over to us, and we work primarily with a restoration expert, Thad Komorowski, who will then take the film, and there's various programs that he uses where you can go, there's a little AI, but there's also a lot of manual work where you go through and you clean it up, get rid of the scratches, get rid of the dust, to get the what's called grading, so the black, if it's black and white, get the black and whites so they're even throughout the film. Or the color, then when they're color, they have to be consistent and have the color brought up to whatever we try to figure out what was the original color, what was it supposed to be, and then try to bring it up to that. And we clean up the audio when there is audio to bring up. And for the silent films, we're slowly starting to get our own music scored for them so that you've got original appropriate music to go underneath them. Then that's pretty much it. Guys, did I miss anything? Mauricio or Ray?
No, I mean, that's pretty much it. I think with technology just being so accessible now, I mean, if you're just a amateur restoration guy, you have a film, you could easily just send that off to a film scanner and you'll get it, within a week. You pay a couple $100. I mean, thankfully, everything's been so easy now where, we could have a small group of people. We just send them the raw scans. They do their magic and we're pretty much done. And I think another aspect to this too is the important relationships that we're building with archives around the world. Because outside of the material that Paramount has, there's, the Supermans, which are all in public domain, but the original source material is owned by Warner Brothers.
What do you think
And
about those restorations that they put? I think it was last year that they put out their own version of the
Who
restorations.
wants to chime in?
And I
Mm,
can cut this if you want me to, but I'm dying to know.
Well, I've answered that on some of the public appearances when that has come up. And I can be charitable about it, but I can also understand as an outsider to give them some amount of credibility because we don't know exactly what it is that they were left to work with. The major problem with that recent Blu-ray release, actually, there were two issues, but the primary problem was that they either didn't have access to or did not know the proper intro music tracks to use. And some of them had specific uses of music and sound effects. For instance, Electric Earthquake had a rumble to it. Billion Dollar Limited had the sound of the train rushing as you see the headlight coming towards you. Electric Earthquake had the electricity that you hear and that sort of thing, or things of that nature. And so those got mixed up. The other criticism was some people thought that maybe they cleaned them up too much, where they were too flat as far as the color was concerned. There was no film grain that you could see. The colors on Lois's suit were maybe too orange when they should have been tan, which is true. So that gets to be a subjective issue, is to decide how far do you go with some of the color. Because if you go back to the elements, as we've been fortunate to be able to do, you can see there's a lot more subtlety in it. And a lot of this seems to be subject to whoever the technician is who's involved. And in all due respect, you can't go in there as a technician and make decisions on whether these colors are not bright enough or not, because they did not use garish colors. A lot of these are very subtle. And you have to really go into this with a multiplex background, not just being an expert in video and that sort of thing. You have to have something of an art background to be able to determine what was the color palette and what is the balance. I have a color background, so I can kind of tell whether it looks like it's too garish or not saturated enough or something like that. So it's a matter of applying knowledge, and it's a subjective thing, but as long as it looks decent. But even the average people are wondering whether this is right, if it looks like it's too bright.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's too clean.
I think one of the issues currently, I think about this, is the whole using AI to really enhance, the Cameron films that are coming out there, and that's the last thing we want to do.
I like the air
yeah.
quotes because that's exactly what it is. Enhanced.
Yeah, because it's, we have to be mindful of that stuff. Thankfully, we're such a tight knit group that we talk about this a lot. About, yeah, we want to make sure this stuff looks the way it should, the original versions and stuff. And I mean, when we initially started this project, yeah, the Supermans were on our list. We were like, yeah, we should work on these. The big hurdle is finding good copies of them, 35 prints, because we're not going to be able to get the camera negatives from Warner Brothers. And when they announced that Blu-ray, I mean, at least for me, I was like, well, I guess we don't have to do this now. I mean, they're putting it out. But as the reviews started coming out, and as the complaints and all that, then I was like, all right, then I guess we're gonna have to take another look and maybe search for this stuff. And like I said, because all of them are in public domain, essentially, if you can find a print yourself, restored and put it out there, you can do that. I mean, that's how my generation saw these cartoons, were through these cassette tapes. And thankfully, because I know recently there was some bad news about layoffs at the Academy Film Archive, but the Academy Film Archive were the people who stepped up and were like, we have Superman films in 35 that we scanned in, I think they were scanned in 5K. I know it's a bit of overkill, but it's Superman. We have to. So just to put it out there, we have restored the Superman films. Not all of them. I think we're missing like 2 or 3 of them. but the bulk of the episodes we have, and they have the correct audio, they have the correct, grain in there and the correct colors and all that. Um, but I mean, just to show you, I mean, the Superman films, if you haven't seen them on the big screen, they're amazing.
Also, just to add to that, the Thad, the restoration expert that we work with, is also a stickler for historical accuracy. So he really looks into, what was this supposed to be, and is very careful about not creating a false record for something. He really wants the cartoons to be as they were intended to be.
And since we're, in the holiday season, I want to direct people to a video on our channel for Christmas Comes But Once a Year, which is one of the first color classic episodes that we restored, which looks insanely gorgeous. I mean, if you've grown up watching this one on the red beat up print, this is just night and day. But there's also a video on our channel that goes into behind the scenes about how the Technicolor technique was developed and how it was used with the Fleischers. Because before Technicolor, they used a different process. That's why kind of those early colored cartoons, especially for example, the Poor Cinderella cartoon, that's just like in limited colors. But these Technicolor ones that we're restoring, because they're coming straight off the camera negative, and now with technology where, you have to combine sort of the different films to get that color. But now because the advancement of technology, for example, if one of them is shrunken down, from what I understand, that was the issue before tech digital, is matching up the film so they could match color. But now that we can, size up or put everything nicely corrected, they just look insane. They look amazing. The best they've ever been seen. And Ray mentioned this a while back, and yeah, it just hit me like, yeah, we're seeing easily the best versions that nobody's ever seen before. Because think about it, they would have to make a film print from the negative, and that'd be sent out all over the country, and that's what they would see. They would see a copy of a copy, but we're going straight to the original camera negative source, which is giving the most insane looking picture imaginable. For example, there's one called Play Safe that has this amazing backdrop scene. That's another thing if you guys want to check out. The Fleischer's invention of the backdrop, the stereoptical process, where they would create a real set and then put the cells over it. With Play Safe, it's so gorgeous. They created this whole train set that just goes in and out, and we're finally getting to see what it's supposed to look like, the colors and the resolution of it. It's just so gorgeous. I could just go on and on, but really the best way to see this stuff is on the big screen, so you can really enjoy it, enjoy the laughs and everything. But yeah, we're doing it right. I'm glad that we're doing it, and we're doing it right.
That's a good natural wind down point for us, especially as we're coming up to our hour mark. But let's talk about where people can. Let's hit social media. Let's hit YouTube. Where can people find everything that's happening with all of you? I want books, YouTube channels. Let's promote it all. Let's plug it all. We'll start with the you said at Fleischer Tunes everywhere, pretty much, right?
At Fleischer Tunes on YouTube, Instagram. We just got the Blue Sky account. We're
Yeah.
Facebook, Patreon. We have a Patreon. So yeah, if you want to, see some behind the scene clips or some, cartoons that, we're scanning, because there's also a bunch of material that we're scanning, just 60mm prints, just, old prints that we can just put up on YouTube. They're in HD, but, they're just prints that we have that we want to, put content on there for, and we'll put them on there. So yeah, if you want to join, support our cause, the Patreon is the best way. And then aside from that, I do have merchandise, the Rockin' Pins account. What I'm doing on that account is essentially, promoting Groucho Marx, promoting Richard Pryor. I'll give you an exclusive little tidbit. Fox has given me all the films for Gumby. So I'm going to be restoring the Gumby episodes. And dude, that in 8K, I know we did it overkill on 8K, but holy crap, that looks so damn good. Essentially, I'm saving my childhood, man. It's crazy that like as we keep, getting older, and we, all this stuff that we grew up loving is just getting ignored and neglected. So I kind of, I just got this need of like, man, I got to save this stuff. It makes me happy. I'm sure it's going to make thousands of other people happy. But yes, at fleischertoons, Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere you could find us. And at Rockin' Pins, if you're looking for merchandise, I got.
And we have a website.
Yes.
So same things, find it at fleischertoons. And for paper information, my dad wrote a book called Out of the Inkwell, The Animation Revolution. And also Ray Pointer, who happens to be here today, has a book. Ray?
Yeah, present.
Yes. And
I can see it over your shoulder. It's up there on top of the filing cabinet.
All the animation historians that you know about that talk about Fleischer, they all got their information from Ray. Ray is the main source for anything Fleischer. That's why he's just been so important to our mission, because we want to give people the context of the studio and get questions, answers, and stuff. So Ray joins us when he can at these events. So we actually have a big one. There's a Los Angeles Animation Festival that's happening in a couple weeks. I'll post it on Instagram, but Ray is going to join us there. And we're going to have Billy West is going to be on there. Dave Wasson, who's the creator of the Cuphead Netflix show, is going to be there. And yeah,
I wanted to ask you about Cuphead. I'm sorry, we'll come back to that, but go ahead.
No, yeah. Ray's book, if you're a big fan of the Fleischers, get it. It's got a bunch of pictures in there in color. It goes through the whole process of how the studio worked and everything.
Tell us how long it took you to construct the book.
About 2 years.
Well, that's not too bad.
Well, I had to rethink my understanding on it and did more research. And as I said, when we were first talking, I came into more information that actually plugged in a lot of the holes in the story. So a great deal of the content of that in this book has never been published before, including photographs inside of both of the studios, both the New York and Miami studios. So not in addition to examples of the cartoons and the inventions, you also have a studio tour.
Don't you have a YouTube channel as well?
Yes, I do.
So, what's the name of it?
Why, the Ray Pointer channel, of course.
And the link is in the description of this episode as well, for everybody to scroll down and click through. I did want to ask about Cuphead as we close here, because I think if you're in your teens or your 20s or maybe even your early 30s, that is the closest thing we've had to Fleischer in a long time. How do you feel about Cuphead? Because it's not Fleischer, but it is so closely mimicking that theme.
Well, from the Fleischer family point of view, we were honored. We were delighted that they chose that style for their wildly popular products and game and TV show. So, we didn't feel in any way bad. We just thought, wow, this is amazing. This is wonderful.
It was reassuring because when I was in high school, this goes back to 1968, 69, 70, I recognized the value of that style too, but I was told, oh, that's old fashioned. That doesn't matter. Da, 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 da. I figured someday it's going to return. And I wanted to be prepared for that.
And quickly, lo and behold, it did.
And from my point of view, I'll be honest, initially I was kind of like, hey, what the hell? Like, they're ripping it off, right? And I think mainly my biggest grudge, not with Cuphead, the creators or that, just the whole push for that style, is that they didn't really credit, not that they should have, I mean, just in general, there wasn't a credit, there wasn't a link back to the Fleischer style or the Fleischer company itself. I think that was my biggest gripe with it, because I would just keep saying, oh, that's Cuphead style, that's Cuphead style. So when they would see an old cartoon, they'll just say it's Cuphead style. And quite frankly, I was like, okay, how can I turn that where, okay, if you're a fan of Cuphead and you want more, then here's where you could find more of that stuff. And thankfully, we connected with the voice actors, the creator of the Cuphead show. And we've done a couple of Cuphead shows where we'll show an episode and then we'll show, one of the Fleischer cartoons kind of back back to back so they can kind of see the influence. So if anything, that's kind of also helped us get that style, that Fleischer brand out there into the ether. And then now it's just up to us to really focus that attention and say, okay, you want more of that? Here you go. We'll lead you to the right direction. So it definitely helped us. It's definitely a big boost getting that younger audience interested into this art style and this sort of content that we're trying to preserve and save. So at the end of the day, it helps us out. It's great, makes new fans. It's essentially, you know, I don't want to say this, but if you're like a drug dealer, you give somebody their first hit, you know, and then you make them wanting more, you know, you give them that first little hit of Cuphead style and all that, and like, oh, I want more. And it's just, quite frankly, I'm addicted to Fleischer. That's what I'm trying to say. I just, every time we find a new cartoon, I just get so just wrapped up into it. It's just so amazing. But yes, at the end of the day, Cuphead has helped us out tremendously, getting that sort of style back out there into pop culture and having people, you know, finally admire it, pinpoint it to Fleischer and say, oh, that's why this stuff is so cool, because it was done by this studio.
You know, I might add too that Sonic the Hedgehog also is a throwback to that style. At least that's what I recognized when I worked on that series back in the 1990s. Those character designs are also from that same period.
Oh, I mean, if you don't know the history too, the reason Donkey Kong is around was because Nintendo wanted to first do a Popeye video game, but they couldn't get the rights for Popeye, so they ended up doing the Donkey Kong thing, and then that is, you know, has brought Super Mario to the world. And funny enough, Leslie Cabarga, who had his own book, his own Fleischer book, he did the artwork, the original artwork for Donkey Kong, the arcade cabinets and everything. So there's that Fleischer connection. But yeah, it's just fascinating how much Fleischer is, you know, influenced the world of pop culture and all this sort of stuff. So it's just us just shining a light on the studio and just getting more people to love it.
The influence is incomparable. It is immeasurable. It's huge. It's been influencing culture for, you know, well, about 100 years, a little bit over 100 years. I could talk to you guys all day, but I'm gonna wrap it up. Stick with me after I close it, and I'll say goodbye to you off the air. But I want to thank all of you for your time and for your enthusiasm and for keeping these films alive for everyone.
No, thank you. And look, Betty wants to say thanks as well. So, no, we appreciate it.
Thank you for having us on. It's been a pleasure.
I love to tell the story.